Welcome, y'all. Come join me on my adventure in hunting down my F100. Alright, so the seller's offer up post says the truck is a 1972 F100, and after looking at the pictures, I was obviously interested, but I needed to inspect the truck in person because it would tell me what it's been through. I went ahead and spoke to the seller about the truck, and they claimed it was a F100. Just as a warning, people out there would try to trick you, they genuinely just don't know. So before I decided to make the trip out there, I asked the seller for a picture of the title. I also asked them if they could specifically take pictures of the spot that concerned me. Before you go ahead and make the trip, make sure to ask a lot of questions that you want answered to. Also, don't hold back. If the seller doesn't want to waste their time answering your questions about the actual history of the vehicle, then don't bother, because it just gives you an off-putting impression of suspicions, or they really don't want to make the effort in sending you the vehicle. As a buyer, you're already in advantage territory when it comes to negotiating. The cards are also in your favor when the owner is moving out of state or wants to get rid of it. Or it could be that they just don't have the time and space for it. So keep an eye out for those sellers. You want to make sure you know the whole story and they're not withholding the truth from you. Plus, you can tell when someone is lying to you and when they change their story or not being responsive right away. Heck, they can even make the car sound more appealing than what it really is. So keep your emotions out the door. Act like you don't need this vehicle, because that's when people respect you more. I asked if the truck has a clean title, because that's important to me. Alright, so let's get back to the title. So I ran the VIN through a Ford dedicated website. I'll make sure to link that in the description. It says the truck is actually an F250. See, this is why research pays off in the long run. Alright, I know I told you I'm on the hunt for my F100, but I thought this would be a learning experience for myself and hopefully for one of y'all out there. We want to make sure what works, what doesn't, or an indication of a bigger problem. My main goal is to familiarize myself with this breed of species. Okay, now that y'all have a backstory, let's get into it. Alright, let's start out with the VIN tag, which is located on the driver's side door jamb. Then you got the manual windows, which operate like they're supposed to. Looks about right for a 51-year-old truck. Alright, so here we got the interior doors with the black finish, which actually look pretty nice. The condition of the dash seems to be in good shape and looks almost brand new. The interior seems to be in pristine condition. Definitely held up well. The headliner is a thin piece of wood, which my friend pointed out, but I've actually seen other builds with this strange placement. You got the brand new aftermarket steering wheel. So we got the gauges and instrument clusters, which actually look pretty good. We got the automatic transmission, a stripped gauge cluster wire, new aftermarket gauges. If possible, remove the carpets to further inspect the condition. You want to look for ruddy metal, which means the floors have no reinforcement, which makes it dangerous to drive. Like in my case, the mats are attached to the floor, so I will need to look under the truck. Check for moving parts and locking mechanisms, like this bench seat. A bit resistant, but it works. As you can see, my friend lifted up the bench knitted cover, which exposed the worn out bench. We got the primary fuel tank behind the bench seat. Now inspect the windshield from the inside. Check for any cracks or chips. This one is in good condition. For safety, we will check the brakes and accelerator pedal for firmness. Seller did mention that the carb needs some tuning and that they attempted to start up the truck before I got there, but it did not work. I went ahead and turned the ignition because I was curious to see if it would start. Alright, here comes the exciting part, the engine compartment. So the seller did tell me that the engine is not stock and has been replaced. If it was stock, it would have been a 390 cubic inch, according to a Ford dedicated website. At first glance, y'all think you could figure out the motor? If you really wanted to find the engine size, there are going to be serial numbers engraved inside the block, which will identify the engine for you. Another method is, you'll need to measure out the stroke of the crankshaft. So just by visual inspection, the truck has been sitting for a while, which most likely is in need of a tune-up. It seems to have everything there. Alright, here we got a second VIN location, stamped onto the right front frame rail. Just need to clean it in order to see it. The hoses look brand new, belt is good, new battery cables, plus new terminals. The engine is in need of hosing down and is leaking oil from the front crank seal. Checking fluids is an essential part in a vehicle because this informs you of any signs of wear, broken down, and water in the fluids. So right now we're checking the power steering fluid, which is empty. Most likely it could be that the reservoir is leaking. Now let's check the oil. It meets oil level and looks good. You'll want to smell the oil for any fuel or burnt fumes. No signs of being frothy or metallic specks. In a scenario where that was the case, don't bother. You're better off looking for another truck, since that is a huge indication that the motor is too far gone or there is a head gasket leak. Unless you wanted to swap out the engine, then have at it. As we can see, the coolant reservoir is empty and not sealed properly, which could have been a sign of overheating. Now checking the transmission fluid, we can see that it meets the mark. It even looks and smells brand new. Take a look at the hood springs and hood hinges to make sure they're working properly. So touching base with identifying the engine, according to Summit Racing, here we see the distributor goes through the intake manifold, which makes it an FE big block engine. This engine uses 5-bolt valve covers. The FE is easy to spot because the valve covers overlap the intake manifold. Alright, moving on to gaskets. Gaskets will blow because they dry out. Normally this is from overheating for a short period of time. However, with no oil, coolant, liquid flow, they will wither slowly, which will result in dry out and fracture or otherwise blow. As we know, gaskets are subjected to intense heat, as well as significant variations in temperature and humidity, but over time, it will cause them to fail, whether that is stretching or losing its structural integrity. It would have been sick to hear this beast turn on. We got the transmission cooler lines. The exhaust manifolds are going to need replacement. All the oils, fluids, and filters will need replacement. Electrical wiring will need rerouting and cleaning up. The old fuel will need to be siphoned out and fresh fuel will need to be put in the tanks. Alright, here we have spots like this one where metal has been eating away. Also here as well. It is very clear that the hood does not align due to this gap. It could be that the hood bolts or hood hinges are not aligned or the springs are seized, which could be the reason why the hood doesn't sit flush. As you can see, the windshield and the rubber weather stripping looks good. So, fun fact, in between the wedge of the roof and the windshield, it is common for there to be rust due to water seeping in and staying trapped in there. So yes, it is not that bad right now, but it will need some work in the future. If it is dusty like this one here, it'll be easier to find the cracks or chips. Passenger side fender seems to have surface rust. Next up, you want to check the edges and run your fingers on the fender lip, but be careful since it is sharp. You're looking for any rust contamination. Make sure to also look behind the tires, and we can already see that the metal has been eating away at the front inner fender apron. It is clear that this part is welded on and part of the frame, so that is going to need some body work. Moving on to the body lines. So what you want to make sure is that the body lines line up, because that will let you know if parts have been replaced and weren't aligned correctly, or worse, the vehicle has been in a collision. So be mindful of gaps. Now looking at the door, you want to make sure it lines up with the cap shell. Visually it's not that bad, but who knows how deep it's gone. Passenger door seems to have surface rust, but that's replaceable. So just make sure you're scanning the truck entirely. Like this right here at the bottom of the door. This will need attention. Quickly, I want to point out, as you can see the body lines here, they are definitely not aligned. If that's a concern for you, okay. But as for me, it's not a big deal. But if the door won't sit flush, then we have a problem. Found the secondary fuel tank on the passenger side. This place right here between the bed and cab, I want to point out that water and dirt find its home here, which means rust. We weren't able to get a good shot, but the condition looks really good. Okay, now looking at the bed. It has rust and scratches but no dents. The rear wheelhouse panels have rusted away, which you can see through the formed holes. Looking at the inner fender, it doesn't look too far gone. Okay, so the amount of rust on these leaf spring mounts is very common, which is why you want to make sure you inspect them, since those are responsible for reinforcing your leaf springs. The amount of rust coating on this frame and chassis is insane. Alright y'all, and the tailgate opens. The truck's bed condition is not bad for a farm looking truck. I'm assuming the floor mat is there to protect the sheet metal, but as we pull up the mat, it doesn't look too good. It seems like nothing protects it from the moisture, rain, and heat, which ultimately turns into this. I wanted to see how far the damage was by exposing the bed. Be careful when standing on the bed because there could be some weak spots in the sheet metal. Also, don't forget about the spare tire's condition. In this case, it looks just the same as the other ones. Fuel tank looks great, but in this case where the truck has been sitting for some time, it could have either rusted or dirt may have found its way inside. Most likely the old fuel has been rotting away in there, which can damage the truck's engine. For example, bend your push rods, get your intake valve stuck, etc. As the fuel degrades, it can lead to gum and varnish to form, which can clog up your fuel lines, carburetor, fuel pump, and tanks in a unit, and other areas of the fuel system. That is why it is essential to store your classics with a fuel stabilizer. While we're here, let's inspect the roof and the crevices, which seem to have surface rust and minor exposed crack welds. Looking at the rear windshield, it has no chips or cracks, and its rubber weather stripping looks to be intact. Now let's see if the tailgate closes. It sure does. This leaf spring mount to my right looks in the same condition as the other ones. That exhaust pipe rubber piece is tearing. The 9 lug nut tires would have been in normal condition, but because the truck remains stationary, it is showing signs of cracks and wear. The truck's got all-around brake drums. As you can see here, the driver's side door body lines don't align. So we know that this door doesn't completely seal shut, which could mean that the hinge brackets, door seals, and door latch striker could be worn, or it could be that the bolts are stripped. We got oil sludge by the drive shaft. While we're under here, let's scan for any parts that are loose. Primary muffler tailpipe has signs of dirt and moisture on the exterior, which concerns me because it could have made its way inside, being an immediate health risk in itself. This condition looks like there was an overheating problem. Same thing goes for the secondary muffler tailpipe, since it looks like it's been burning. These spots on the exhaust pipes lead to rust, which can produce an exhaust leak. A crack or a hole can also cause your vehicle to experience fuel inefficiency, a reduction in power, and an inability to accelerate, ultimately leading to exhaust failure. So it is important to spray off your exhaust system with water regularly to remove salt and particles. As for this truck, that did not happen, which is why you see this much rust. There are jams in between the chassis when the bed rests and bolts on. You see the moisture trapped in there, which is only going to get worse. I am knocking on the frame to hear how it sounds and to check for any decomposing rust. Since the exhaust is hanging low, they got all the moisture off the road. Exhaust clamps and exhaust have corrosion and rust. Looks like the oil pan is leaking. Undercarriage would definitely need some degreasing. Brake lines are looking good. Lower control arm ball joint had ruptured due to extreme wear. As we know, the chassis is coated with rust. The fact that the seller told me this truck has been used to tow a lot makes me question the chassis strength. The differential seems to have held up really well. Now looking at the end of the truck, there is moisture and dirt trapped in there. Electrical connections might need attention, depending if there has been dampening and moisture. The sheet metal up there has rust. There you can see wet spots due to moisture and dirt on the truck's bed. Both outer lower cab corner steel panels are deteriorating. Also, more rust on the inner frame, which makes it difficult to check for cracks. Here are two lists of the truck's strengths and weaknesses. Feel free to pause the video if you'd like to take a look. Owner's listing price is $3,000. I'd be interested in knowing what y'all would pay for this truck. Well, thank y'all for joining. And remember, it's not your job to make people understand what your purpose is. First Class 1972. Signing out.